Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Are ACEDS. I'm your guest host, Ari Kaplan. I'm an analyst that covers legal, and I have the privilege of serving as the chairman of the ACEDS Global Advisory Board. So every other Wednesday, this program highlights the members, chapters, partners, and experts in the legal community. And if you'd like to share any feedback or have a question, please submit it in the comments and we'll share it on screen. You can also do the same with reactions or whatever, assuming they're positive. And today I'm very excited. I am joined by Sonya Judkins, who is the manager of discovery and information governance at T-Mobile and a member of our ACEDS Global Advisory Board. Hi, Sonya. How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. I feel so lucky to talk to you today. So why don't we start? Tell us a little bit about your background and your role at T-Mobile.
So last year in 2020, Sprint merged with T-Mobile, and I managed at Sprint. I was there for 20 plus years. We won't say how many, but I managed discovery and information governance, records retention, all sorts of things. And so the new role at T-Mobile is primarily the same. I'm part of a group called Discovery and Information Governance, where we manage everything from legal holds to collections to strategy to testifying and all of those things. So it's been a great journey in the past 9 months.
So you mentioned that you were at Sprint for, let's call it, a couple of decades prior to its merger with T-Mobile. To what do you attribute your longevity at a single company?
I think that it boils down to loyalty and tenacity. You have to be loyal. You have to have earned that loyalty also. So I've been trusted, and you just don't give up. You try to figure out ways to accomplish different things when you don't have a lot of resources. And people really trusted my instinct. So that's led me to grow within the company and just try new different things, which has got me to where I am now.
What does it take to get people to trust your instincts? And, how long does that take?
So I think it takes a while for sure. It's not human nature is not instinctively trusting all the time. Some people look different. Some people act different. They have different terminology and language and mannerisms. So, being a Black woman in the field of discovery way back when was really rare, and it was not really meant. A lot of people didn't perceive us as knowing things and being able to do things. Because I'm not an attorney, that was another kind of whammy, like, oh, why should she be here? But I proved myself, and I think a lot of people can if given the opportunity. So it just took me raising my hand to say, hey, I'd like to try that, or what's your problem? And being a problem solver really broke down the walls for the attorneys that had these traditional roles to allow me to come in and give a voice to what their issues were.
I love your point about problem solving. How do professionals combine sort of the consistency and the expertise that builds trust and yet navigate the perpetual motion that's required to know about technology and all the changes that come about as a result of what's happening in e-discovery?
Yeah, well, I think you have to first be accountable. You have to own it, whatever it is. And you have to have the art. I practice like this no fear mentality. There's nothing I don't think I could do or figure out, and I'm not afraid of that. And not everybody has that skill set, but I think that's one that you need because you have to kind of be on, and it has to be right in the world of discovery all the time, or else there's consequences, as we know. But you also can't be so limited that you don't try something new, that you don't think out the box. And that's where I've kind of sat in a sweet spot of not really being afraid to just try something. I'm like, why don't we take this software and use it this way? And amazingly, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes you have to tweak it and like, well, we tried. So, and owning, when it doesn't work. I'm very responsible for, I take the responsibility of owning something very seriously, and that's paid off.
Have we become more comfortable with the idea of not knowing everything. I know that my kids, for example, will always say to me, Dad, how do you know how to do that? And I'll always have to admit, I really don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. They're like, well, what if this breaks? I'm like, it breaks. I don't know. But have we become more comfortable with that even in the workplace?
I think so. I think you have to be. I mean, if you look at historically, even the big companies, the Walmarts, the McDonald's. I was watching a series on how the McDonald's brothers built the McDonald's. And so I think you have to be uncomfortable with the unknown, but you have to have a goal. Like, what are you seeking? It's not just go through this effort, whether it's in your professional career or personal. You still have to have a quest. There has to be a drive of, why are you doing this? My function every day, I get up and I'm like, how can I do this better? Like, have I learned anything? How can I share it? Because when I get to the top of this mountain, I don't want to be alone either. That's boring. So my goal is to kind of keep taking the history that I know from, ancestries and different people and different environments and background, and using that to kind of push the envelope a little bit.
My friend's mom, a woman named Dr. Tara Weiss, was a professor of existential literature, and she used to always say to me that it's the journey, right? It's not the destination. And you mentioned this getting to the mountaintop. I don't even know what that even looks like or where that is. Were there lessons that you learned early in your career that have kind of had this lasting impact to drive that philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest lesson that I learned actually came from my old boss. And when I was fresh into litigation, I had never worked in a law firm. I had never done anything. I didn't have a degree. And I was like, why are you keep picking on me? Why do you think that I have this thing? Why do you keep bothering me about this work? But she taught me a very valuable lesson, which was never assume bad intent. And when she was trying to teach me the lessons of litigation in the process, my goal was to really find, obviously, I didn't really know that I was doing discovery back then. So she was teaching me, but she explained it in a way that you have to be able to explain your story. And so I've always carried that with me. I use it in my professional and my personal life of just never knowing what the other person's history might be or their background or their philosophy, and just come with a common goal of, I'm trying to show you something. Here's the proof. And my discovery was the proof that luckily won our many cases.
Given the impact that this mentor had on you, how do you share your experience with those that you're now mentoring?
Yeah, well, I try to, I'm a storyteller, I think, at heart, which I didn't really know that I was until a few years ago, but I'm always telling stories and telling examples. How did I do it? What did I do? It's the road, like this mountaintop that I'm trying to reach, which is going to be different for everyone. Your level of happiness may not be the same as mine, but that doesn't mean don't negate mine. And so during those climbs, and sometimes they're parallel, sometimes you fall, sometimes you get back up. The goal really is to make sure that I tell and explain the story so that the person who I'm talking to, whether it's a coworker or my daughter who thinks that she's, 28 and she's 10, really understands the lessons, because there's always lessons in it. There's lessons that I've learned from my mother and my grandmother who didn't go to high school. And so I'm able to pass that on and give back, but also pull up the other people who I want to be aside, sit aside me, which is hard. Sometimes they don't understand. But you just educate them with the stories and make it relatable. And you have to listen to, where are they now? Not everything is meant to happen at the same time. And I think patience has taught me that, quite honestly, over the past several years. My husband had a heart attack. I resuscitated him. And ever since then, life is a little bit different, where the things that I was like, oh, I got to get the trash out by 6 and I have to do this. It's a journey. Not everything is going to happen at one time. And you just have to take your time and focus on the foundations.
Your point about your mother, your grandmother, I was very close with my grandmother, and I used to record our telephone conversations as she got older. And she didn't ever work in a professional capacity, but she taught me so many lessons just about the items that you're talking about, resilience and empathy and kindness. And it's interesting that we're reinserting that in some ways into the workplace.
Yeah, I think if you don't have that, you might achieve a quote status or a title or a, ranking, whether you're in military or, civil life. But I think most people in their core really want those foundational attributes. They want to have a good feeling at the end of the day. I don't know another person that I've ever met in my life that is like, oh no, I just don't want to really kind of do anything. Like, I've never heard that, but maybe there are people out there like that. But most people generally want to do good. They want to have something to hang their hat on. And all of those skills, no matter what type of background you have, no matter, what nationality, ethnicity, at the core, it's all about, giving props for where you come from, and then where can you take it, and kind of blending all together.
You mentioned your daughter, your husband. How do you describe what you do to your family?
So my husband now has a better appreciation of my technical skills, which he was like, you actually know about servers? And, he just thought because I sit in legal. He's like, well, I just thought you come up and write laws. And I'm like, no, I don't do that. So he definitely has a better understanding and appreciation. My daughter, who has always been raised with the phone in her hand since she's been born, now understands and appreciates just the effort that it takes, the hours that mommy spends on the phone or at night writing or getting up at 2 or 3 in the morning because a project is due. And what I think it's taught them both, and even my own self, is just discipline. There are things that you're just going to have to sit down and do it. No one's going to, you can get advice and you can get help. But at the end of the day, being accountable and knowing that that's my work product is valuable to me. And so I teach that lesson, whether it's, like I said, to my daughter, spelling the words correctly matters. All of those small things matter. So the more that you practice it, the more it will become comfortable. And we all have our own internal fears, like, oh, my hair is this, or I'm fat, or I'm skinny, or I'm whatever. But those are just distractions.
Or I'm stuck outside standing against the brick wall of my house.
Those are just distractions.
So how have you adapted? It's interesting. My family also sort of sees what I'm doing, even though a lot of what they see is just me standing here. And, but I find it interesting. How have you adapted to working from home?
So at first I was like, oh, people work from home, have it so easy, they don't have to go anywhere. No, I've definitely changed the mindset, because there's definitely longer days because you can't. And obviously with COVID, you can't physically go anywhere. So I think that it has made me more aware of how to partner together, whether that's, and sometimes it's not always a video call. You don't always have to see people, but I find that it's helpful. I found that, having more video calls breaks down just this wall of fear of like, I don't know the other side. I don't trust the other side. In our recent merger with T-Mobile and Sprint, luckily, my current boss, we were able to talk and just put everything down, and being able, even though we're physically not close to each other, and we live in I'm on the East Coast, she's on the West Coast. So we'll probably never physically be in the same office all the time, but I feel like we're connected. And I think that's the biggest thing, is you're not alone, even though you're physically separated. And you just get used to the hours. I really try to block out time for my family. So the commute time that I would normally have in the DC area, which could be up to 2 hours each way, I try to block that time and really turn the computer all the way off, turn my phone off, put my phone down at dinner time. Like, we don't have phones during the dinner time, because I'm trying to get back to and I miss so much from working. So, I'm really trying to devote that time back to my family or my mom or whoever I'm really careful about, and just be deliberate with my time.
Somebody sent me an article about people fake commuting as a way of creating that separation. And I thought, well, if you're going to fake commute, you should fake a sitting in your car in traffic. You should fake missing the train and being frustrated. You should fake being stuck at a train station. I thought you've romanticized the commute a little bit too much. So what do you think, though, will remain part of our culture, our work culture, when we all kind of return to a physical office?
Yeah, well, I think hopefully the good part about this past year is that it's taught us to appreciate each other. It's taught us to just really, I've found out who my real allies are in the middle of the night when things don't work, or my favorite IT person has now received 10 boxes of Girl Scout cookies because I could not have made it without him. So I think it's separated us a little bit to figure out who's really going to support you. But I hope, my hope is that we just have a level of appreciating everyone's position and their jobs and their responsibilities and how much time it really takes to do the job. I often say to my team, the attorneys send me these subpoena requests, or I get this crazy deadline, and I'm like, how am I going to do that? What am I going to do? And I often say to my team, they have no idea what it takes to run this ship. And so by having to slow down a little bit and explain things, particularly to new partners at the new company and even at the old one, it's just given a deeper appreciation for my responsibilities, their responsibilities. I try to take things back that I know that I can handle that I would have maybe pushed off to someone else. So I think even coming back physically, it will be different. I think we're just going to be limited to just exposure to people. But I also don't think that is a hindrance to the job, to getting the goals accomplished. I think we've successfully proven that we can be separate, but yet united.
So you inspired me last year because you may remember that the board members were trying to study for the ACEDS exam, the ones who obviously didn't have a ACEDS certification. And then you went and you just took it and got your certification. And I was like, oh man, I really have to study. She doesn't even need to study. And so I'm just curious, what about, why the ACEDS certification at this time?
So I will say that I did have to study. I probably should study a little bit better, but I was like, oh, I know that. But then I'm like, no, I better study. And I'm glad I did. So I don't want to lighten the certification. It requires some effort, even for those who have been in the job 20 plus years, because you get used to your way of doing it. And I'm like, well, I would do it this way, but what should I be doing? So I want to make sure that that's on the record. And I think the timing was perfect for me personally, because I had been at Sprint and / Nextel for 20 plus years. And even though we were merging with T-Mobile, I knew, or I'm hopeful that I would know that I had a place at the new company, but it was just a personal quest, a checkoff mark, hey, let me validate the work that I've been doing. It was probably more internal for me to say, yeah, you still have it. The decisions that you're making are right. And even to other people who questioned, why should, this Black lady who's not a lawyer, which is a big factor in a lot of discovery decisions, have a seat at the table. And so it was another way for me to validate my decisions, my process, my thinking, and my strategy for trying to say, no, I know this stuff, and here's a baseline, and I'm going to prove it to you. I think clearly during Black History Month, it's been a way to say what I do matters, what I do has significance, and I am a contributor to my company and to myself. And so that's the reason why I did it. It's just another, and I like to put things in front of my brother and my mother to say, hey, look what I did.
Well, as someone that is lucky enough to sit at least one table on the board with you, I'm grateful for all that you've taught me. And I wonder, what advice would you give to litigation support or e-discovery professionals who are navigating kind of these different worlds within a corporation?
Yeah, I'd say that the most important thing is just to be open and be willing to, don't label yourself. That's the one thing that is a completely pet peeve of me. I almost don't like my title, because my title it describes me. Although it describes me, it doesn't fully give you a comprehensive view of everything that I touch or do. So I think for many people struggling or rethinking different positions or avenues or your career growth, don't limit yourself to a title. in just one thing, really be able to have conversations with other departments, other leaders. I often reach out. I just had a call last week with a senior vice president in a completely different organization than legal. And it wasn't because I want a job there. It was just because I was interested in how she got there. And so even in this journey of figuring out what makes me happy, where do I want to be, how can I contribute, I gained some valuable information just by listening to her. And so we were able to share things. So I would encourage people to seek out other people, that are different, that are diverse from you. You know, one of the things my grandmother used to tell me was, sit at the table with somebody who doesn't look like you, which I didn't understand or appreciate until I was in my 40s, of just learning. And it wasn't from a place of like, you know, mine is mine and yours is yours. It was a place, she was coming at it from a place of, I never had the opportunity. So that was a bigger impression for me to say, well, I want to meet every person that I can. I want to meet every ethnicity that I can. I want to speak different languages, just from a perspective of learning.
I love that we're talking about lessons from our grandmothers, because my grandmother used to always teach me about relationships and valuing them regardless of how long they last or how long you had them. My grandfather passed away when he was pretty young, but my grandmother and my grandfather had been married for like 30 years, even though he died in his 50s. And she'd always tell me how lucky she was to have been married to this man, even though he had been gone for so many years of her life. And it's always stayed with me. So I love the lessons about that. And this is one relationship, Sonya, that I'm particularly grateful for. I want to close with, you know, how do you see this role, particularly in an environment that has changed so much? We you know, it sort of became much more technological, then it became remote, and now it's become this central point of contact. You certainly, you know, have this leading role. How is the role of a litigation support, an e-discovery professional evolving, and where do you see it headed?
So I think that it's always going to be changing, and you have to first get the mindset that it's always going to be changing. So that's the first thing. I'm always fascinated by technology and how fast it changes. So while you're particularly in a corporation, while you're trying to build these pillars and make sure everybody's following the rules, by the time people understand the rules and you've laid out this testing or, you know, quality control, the rules have changed because technology has changed. So I would say that most people, you have to make sure that you're in a mindset of what I'm doing now has impact for the things that it has now, but it's going to change. Just accept that and being willing to embrace that. I'm not afraid to click on every button of a new software, which sometimes I get in trouble because I've been known to delete a few things accidentally. But the goal is to just make sure that you are being available and open. Again, I think that the lesson is really, don't limit yourself to just pure litigation. You know, litigation is going to come and go as long as we're alive. But the process of how you do it, the thinking, the strategic thinking that it takes to try to get to that end goal, and use resources around you. You know, I am not afraid to pick up the phone and call people. And that's been one of the great things, particularly about ACEDS, that's been really helpful. I was originally intimidated when you asked me to join the board. I'm like, me? Like, why would anybody want to hear from me? But what I found and what I gained was not only like, actually, I do know a little something, you know, we're kind of a piece of a pizza and I'm like the pepperoni and somebody's the sausage. But what I found also was that what ACEDS gave me back was all this exposure to so many other people who might not be facing the exact same problem that I am, but they have a wealth of history and experience. And so I might call on other board members to help me. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think the first thing as a person is we have to agree and acknowledge that we don't know everything and that we're all trying to do it. And discovery can be tough. The deadlines can be brutal sometimes, but you rely on your team. And if you don't have a team, then you call friends. And that's kind of like your grandma say, go back to those relationships, build good relationships, and you will have nothing to fear.
As someone that knows you and has known you for a long time, I knew that anybody who got to know you would be just so excited to learn from you. This is so on behalf of ACEDS, and of course, I just want to give a shout out here. I see that You have Sheila and Cindy and Brian and Alvin, a lot of people watching, at home. I love that. And I just want to say, Sonya Judkins, the manager of Discovery and Information Governance at T-Mobile, who's also a member of our Global Advisory Board. I want to say thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining this week's edition of We Are ACEDS. So you can watch this show live here at the same time every other Wednesday. Don't forget to follow ACEDS on Facebook, on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so you don't miss any of the episodes. And if you want to learn more about ACEDS or the chapters or education, you can visit aceds.org. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you.